Our next guest, Jamie Henn, is on the forefront of the struggle in that area. He is co-founder and communications and East Asia director of 350.org, which is a terrific organization working in this field. He coordinates media. In 2009, it says he coordinated media for almost 5,200 simultaneous events. I'm lucky to get this one program going up every week, and he's worked a lot with Bill McKibben, who's his co-founder on 350.org, who's a wonderful voice in this area. And he's been active in the fight against the XL pipeline, which he's here to talk to us about today. Jamie, thanks so much for being with us.
Hey, it's good to be with you.
So listen, there's been some action, and you've been writing about it in Huffington Post and elsewhere. Other than your throwaway line about this wasn't your parents' protest, which is like, "Hey, kid." It's great stuff, and I'm just joking about that. Of course, over 1,000 students rallied in Lafayette Park, and it sounded like 10,000. That's what you wrote. It was the spark-shooting dynamo of a student movement that's beginning to embrace its true power, and it should, man, because this is your planet. So good on you. Tell us what's been going on. Tell us a little bit about that demonstration and what's been going on Thursday, Friday this week, too.
Sure thing. Well, we are entering the fourth quarter of this Keystone XL Super Bowl, and I think that momentum is on the side of opponents these days. Just last weekend, as you were mentioning, there were over 398 college students who were arrested in what was the largest youth civil disobedience at the White House in a generation. Over 1,000 more students were there in Lafayette Park across the street rallying in support. I was down there all day. It was a tremendous showing of students chanting and singing in the rain that started coming down later that afternoon. I think it's just a taste of the strength of the growing movement that's out there opposing this pipeline. You know, this issue has sent more people to jail and into the streets than any other environmental fight of the last few years. And we're beginning to really feel like our voices are getting heard and that the pressure is really coming to bear on the president. We'll see. You know, this decision is likely to come down in the next couple months. But if President Obama looks at the facts and looks at the political pressure that's building out there, hopefully he'll do the right thing.
Well, and about that, isn't the State Department scheduled to deliver its final recommendation about whether or not to proceed with this project?
That's right. So it's been a long and torturous and rather corrupt process over at the State Department to evaluate this pipeline. The reason the State Department has a say here is because Keystone XL crosses our international border with Canada and therefore requires what's called a presidential permit. And before the president gets the decision on his desk, the State Department conducts a review. Now, the State Department doesn't actually have environmental experts or scientists that work on climate change at state, so they contracted a oil industry contractor, a dues-paying member of the American Petroleum Institute, to write their report for them. Not surprisingly, the report concluded that Keystone wouldn't have the dramatic environmental impact that many scientists says it would. But at the same time, there actually was, surprisingly, enough information in that report to make it easy for the president to still reject it. So right now, the State Department is taking a lot of public comments on the report just this afternoon. The public comment period is closing tonight, so this afternoon we're partnering with a lot of our allies to deliver over 2 million public comments opposing Keystone XL, far greater number than those promoting it, directly to the State Department, uploading them on the website and delivering them in person down at D.C. So, it's another showing that I think the public is realizing that this pipeline is the climate disaster that scientists have said it is and are really pushing the president to make the right call on it.
Well, I talked a couple weeks ago to Amanda Starbuck with the Rainforest Action Network, who was saying that the number of permanent jobs this would create is actually, because that's the argument, of course, we're given, is that, which is a perverse argument, even if it were true, which says, well, we have to trash the planet now because the economy's been so screwed up thanks to Wall Street that that's the only way people can eat anymore is by basically if living on the patrimony of future generations. But so I don't even buy it if it were true. But we had Amanda on a couple weeks ago, and I'm curious to know your thoughts on that. Basically saying that the number of jobs this thing would create on a permanent basis is astonishingly small. That it really does very little. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, that's correct. The estimates that the TransCanada, the pipeline company, has said to the State Department themselves was that this pipeline wouldn't create any more than 50 permanent jobs. I mean, the reason you build pipelines is because they're basically plug and play. I mean, they just let the oil flow. And so this isn't any big job creation plan. Now, that said, we're still in an economic crisis in this country, and people are in desperate need of work and desperate need especially of manufacturing jobs. So even 50 jobs is something that we should take a close look at, and the thousands of permanent or not permanent, but momentary jobs that the pipeline would create, around 2,000 or so, that's useful work. Is it worth the risk? Absolutely not. I mean, when you look at the cost that this pipeline could have on our economy, if that oil goes through and is burned and the climate crisis is worsened, it's enormous. The cost of a spill to the agricultural land in Nebraska and the fresh water that it runs over would be an absolute economic disaster. And so, the small number of jobs that this would create are something to shake a stick at, but they're not enough to really justify building this project, and they're nothing compared to the jobs that could be created if we really started to double down on a clean energy economy. So, look, we take those jobs seriously, but they're certainly not worth building a disaster like Keystone XL.
Well, and I appreciate you saying you take the job seriously because, we lobby for jobs very hard on this program and at the Campaign for America's Future and elsewhere that this country desperately needs jobs. But at a time when the president has proposed $300 billion in infrastructure repair, but the American Society of Civil Engineers says we need 10 times that much, more than 10 times, $3.6 trillion in order just to repair the roads and other infrastructure of this country. If we're worried about jobs, we don't need to endanger the environment to do it. So, and by the way, before I forget, I want to inject that it wasn't you who wrote this about this isn't your parents' protest. It was Bill McKibben, and he may be even older than me. So erase everything I said there. But so listen, time is growing near the comment period. You've got a couple million people speaking up against it, which is terrific, and I'm one of them, by the way. What can people do? First of all. That closes when? Friday night?
Yeah, that closes tonight at 11:59 p.m., so people still have a little bit of time to get a comment in.
Okay, and then what about, what can they do? I assume that going to 350.org, they can also make their voices heard in some way, right?
Well, that's always a good start. There are a number of ways that people can plug in right now. The first is continuing to help spread the truth about the project. There's so much misinformation out there about Keystone XL because the oil industry has been able to spend millions of dollars putting up ads and spreading misinformation. So people's efforts to forward on things to their family and friends, to get on Facebook and Twitter if they're there and share information about the project is really critical. I mean, this is a public debate, and we need to be getting the truth out there. So the daily help that people can provide there is really great. The second piece that's critical is if people are in the D.C. area, there's lots of events where the president and other administration officials are getting out in public to make a variety of speeches or do fundraisers. We've had pipeline opponents at almost all of them, being a constant presence to keep pressure up on the administration to do the right thing. So if people sign up at 350, you can get action alerts and kind of spring into action now and then. And it's a lot of fun to go out there and, really carry a giant pipeline or carry some signs and protest a little bit. That's part of democracy, and it's good to get your feet moving and do that as well. The final
I couldn't agree more, but what about folks who are not in the D.C. area? Can they, you guys got any plans to start to organize actions out there?
You bet. Well, there's lots of those events that happen all across the country wherever the president goes, from coast to coast and everywhere in between. So there's lots of options there. In general, everything people can do to build up more of a movement around climate change and climate justice in their communities really helps. I think the more that our neighbors and our friends see an active movement out there, the more people will get involved. So there's lots of ways. And I think people should really feel like whatever local effort they're doing, they're able to tap into this national movement that's really beginning to gain strength. Finally, mark your calendars. I think towards the end of April, the beginning of May, there'll probably be another big opportunity to come to Washington, D.C. from all around the country to really make a final stand against this project. If it looks like the president's about to make a decision, that's going to be a historic moment. we love doing work all around the world and all around the country, but there are moments in our history where we have to come together in Washington and really make our voices heard. This spring is likely going to be one of those times when we can really take a stand against this project and help push the president to become more of a climate champion. So we don't have all the details yet. We're still waiting to hear from partners and people like that, but people should stay tuned and get excited about some big actions this spring.
And you're saying that's likely to happen toward the end of March, beginning of May? I'm sorry, end of April, beginning of May?
Exactly, end of April, beginning of May. And again, there's lots of other important sites out there as well. Keystone is incredibly important. It's very symbolic, but there are other tar sands pipelines that need to be stopped, other people that are working on coal-fired power plants, mountaintop removal, fracking, you name it. This movement is finding ways to connect those dots and really provide resistance where we need to and push solutions where we can. So people shouldn't be shy about getting involved in those fights and feeling like those really are a part of standing up to big projects like Keystone and pushing our politicians to actually begin doing the right thing.
Well, you guys are right out in the forefront of this. We admire your work here on the Zero Hour. We expect you to continue to keep up the good fight. We'll be asking for updates from you from time to time. So thanks so much for being with us. Jamie Henn, co-founder and communications and East Asia director for 350.org.